have been a lot of questions raised over the future of education. You know, what role will the pandemic play in long-term ways that our children learn? And is school even the best possible place? Joining us now, we've got Sarah Shaw. She's the founder of Future Learning Lab here in the UAE to tell us a little bit more about why there could be an alternative. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. I always think it's so important for us as parents to explore all avenues, especially ones that may not have even heard of. But can you tell us a little bit about what it is you do and where that idea came from?
Sure, Helen. And firstly, I'd like to say thank you so much for having me on your show.
Pleasure.
I think the more and more we talk about the alternatives and the new ways of learning and education, whether it's here in Dubai or anywhere else in the world, is very important, and just building that awareness. The Future Learning Lab was the inception of an idea that I was informed about in February of 2020. So literally about 2 weeks before Dubai went through a lockdown, I asked my mother for a gift, and it was basically a plane ticket to Connecticut for 3 days and to come back. I'd heard about this institution that's called Workspace Education, and how they've reinvented learning by creating a new model called co-learning. And I got to meet the founder there and understand how she came up with her idea. And predominantly, the precipice for the idea was there were many homeschooling families in Connecticut, and the main challenge they had was they never had a one-stop shop for all their learning needs. You think about homeschoolers, and a lot of their concerns are, we need access to a science lab, we need access to facilities that we program ourselves. So the analogy I always like to make, it's like having a gym, but I don't tell you what the workout of the day is. You figure that out yourself.
Okay. Right,
and the other thing I liked so much about her concept was it was very flexible. Scheduling was very much down to the individual as opposed to a mass scheduling for, 30, 40 odd kids in a classroom. Mm-hmm. It was a lot more caring as an environment because most of the people that were in that environment were actually parents teaching their own kids. Quite a few of them actually decided to hire a full-time teacher for their child. And those teachers and educators became available to the community at large. So the fact that the space was a solid venue, but was able to adapt and change internally according to the needs of a community, I think that was what hit me and struck a chord, that kids were learning from each other, parents were learning from kids, kids were learning from parents, and the ecosystem was thriving. You talk about social skills, you talk about emotional skills, you talk about academic capabilities. That fluidity within the space is almost a representation of life. Life isn't rigid, it's very fluid. And I really wanted to bring that concept here to Dubai. So literally the Future Learning Lab, I would say, is a first instance and a pilot of what the potential could be. So she had a 20,000 square foot barn that she refurbished.
Wow.
I've got a 1,600 square foot facility in the IFC. So it's a start. I need to build this community here in Dubai, and I would love for it to benefit from what the future of it could be.
So when you think about the parents, the families, the children that could benefit from an alternative education space, who are those people, do you think, Sarah?
So there are a large group of families, both in Dubai and other Emirates, who have actually opted out of the traditional system. And these could be for many reasons. Some of them are financially driven, and some of them are more principle-driven, that they want their kids to be in a conducive environment, not a one-size-fits-all. And as much as the system tries to prove that it is adapting to the needs of the children, it's still one teacher teaching to 30 kids. It's not the same as when one teacher teaches to 4 or 5 kids. And then you talk about teaching. Teaching is not a one-way street. It's a two-way street. There's so much going on in the world. Who decided that, 12 years was the right amount of time to put a child through school? Who said that these were the only subjects they should be learning? Why are they teaching the subjects in a very silo format as opposed to integrated in a project or in a challenge that the child has to go through? And promote self-direction in children. These were the things that we saw as very relevant, and the parents who have actually decided to be avant-garde and be the leaders of moving to a different ecosystem, those are the ones that I'm interested in experimenting with in the Future Learning Lab, who come in and develop modules for their kids and other kids within their community who could benefit from their expertise, their knowledge, their background. And then also, we are also open to allowing educators who see that, there's a better way for kids to learn. There's more conducive manners for children to implement and use the skills and the knowledges that they learn in their books in real life. And that's also partly why I picked the IFC. We're 10 minutes away from a metro. We're very, strategically positioned in Dubai. We have great access to the Innovation Hub as part of the IFC. Kids could benefit from working on projects that are real and not just hypothetical. They build all the skills that we talk about, like critical thinking, collaboration, problem solving. And to me, the system can no longer be rigid. We cannot fall back on this, we trust the system, it's going to give my child a certificate and they're going to go on to college. There are many kids that are starting their careers much earlier, as early as 17 and 16, with part-time work and doing things that really engage them and light that fire inside them. And that's basically what we want. We want every human being to achieve their maximum potential through a learning experience that is very much about them and not what a system has forced upon them.
Up next, more from my chat with Sarah Shaw of the Future Learning Lab. It is the UNESCO's International Day of Education in conversation with Sarah Shaw of the Future Learning Lab. They're offering a different kind of learning approach to adapt to an ever-evolving situation, of course, affecting the education sector. It's a hub for personalised and flexible education, aimed to defy traditional methods of teaching and learning. Did point out that maybe it is a big risk to veer away from the traditional method. We're still expected to learn in the classroom, physical or otherwise, and follow the traditional curricula that have been tried and tested. Ultimately, people like employers and uni boards still ask for credentials. So what did she say to that?
I mean, all it takes is for one policy to come out and say, we will no longer hire based on your qualification. And that changes the game completely. And how do we react to that as a population? Now, I'm not saying that that's what the government will do, but that is a future that is likely to happen. There's been a movement as well in the education sphere with micro-credentialing, where you collect a group of learnings, knowledges, and skills, and you create something that says you're a specialist in X or Y, whatever the skill is. Something that we're looking to experiment as Future Learning Lab. And the reason I called it a lab was because we believe in experimentation. We believe in parents who really want to test the boundaries of what is possible for their children. And we've seen, I've personally seen children who were in this workspace education in Connecticut, who were as young as 11, talk to me like adults. And it was mind-blowing. The girl that I'm talking about, she sat there and was very critical in the way that she spoke, was very aware of herself, of her surroundings. She was very aware of what she wanted. You ask any child at the age of 13, what subjects do you want to take for your GCSEs or for your A-levels? And a lot of them feel really scared about that decision. While I sat with this 11 and 12-year-old girl, and she was very clear about what she wants and what she doesn't want. And I think what we've lost is you cannot continue to look at the system, especially those parents that have that risk appetite, right? You cannot continue to look at the system as an assurance. You're paying this amount of money to schools for assurances that your child is getting a quality education that's going to get them that piece of paper to go to university and then end up in a job. That's not the traditional route anymore. That is not the way the future looks like. The future is a lot more fluid. It's a lot more diverse. I always tell kids, if you enjoy something so much, you can actually make a profession out of it in this day and age. The internet and the technologies that exist today have allowed you to monetize things that you couldn't have dreamed of monetizing back in the days. So to me, if parents really want their child's happiness and their well-being in the future, the best thing they can do is help build their learning resilience, so their ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn something new, one. And two, to really understand themselves and what makes them ignited, what makes them excited about doing something. Because that's most likely where their career or that drive towards achieving something will take them towards. And yeah, some kids would be more into handiwork, where they're more interested in breaking something up and putting it back together again and changing it. Some kids are more into curiosities. They like to research everything and read so much. Other kids might be very much into arts or the environment. Who are we to stop them from going down that path? And as career-oriented, adults, we change our careers at least twice, if not 3 times in our lifespan.
And obviously it's still ongoing. We're still living through a very, very strange time where, as I said, some kids are distance learning, some are doing a blended approach, some are 100% back, and some may be, families could be asking really big questions, saying, if we're all working from home, then why can't we be learning from anywhere? Or why can't we take a year out as a family? And it feels like everything's up in the air, and I'm maybe clutching at straws at the positivity front, but that is my nature. But it can be seen as a real opportunity. So when you look back, and as you say, it was almost exactly a year ago that you went to Connecticut and thought about bringing this idea back to Dubai. What role do you think COVID-19 and ultimately the way we're responding to this new way of life has kind of played in the future of education?
I think this was the biggest humanity reset button we have ever lived as people. And I think what we've been used to, a line I love to use is, what got us here is not going to get us there. So what we've been doing so far as humans is not going to get us to the next point from this point on. And the reason for that is a lot of the parents have realized the quality of the education that they are paying for is not what they had perceptive in their minds. And the second point is the children have suddenly realized that, what's this whole school system? Why are we doing this? They've had a lot of reflection opportunities, right? And now we're moving into a space where it's all about creating your own learning journey, deciding what it is that you want to know more about and tinker a lot more with and build yourself and create for yourself. Children, we're in an age where we now have Generation Alpha, who have been used to technology from birth. Like they've never had the time where it was analog for them. So how do we deal with that generation that's going to come up in the next 10, 15 years, right? And the future of work is changing in a very fast pace. And as a Generation X myself, it becomes very discombobulating. What do I do now? And I think one thing we forget to do is to be really kind to ourselves as human beings. Yes, we went through a pandemic. Yes, it had a lot of impact, especially on mental health, especially on social connections and relationships we've had with our friends and families. And I think in a world that we're moving towards where there's a lot more fluidity between work and play, work, play, and learn, I think those 3 areas, we need to be more aware of what works for us might not work for others. This herd mentality needs to really change, that we're all going through the same journey, grow up, go to school, get a job, have a family. That traditional route doesn't suit everybody. And the more we see this diversity in human nature and diversity in communities, I think the more vibrant we become as a race.
In conversation this afternoon with Sarah Shaw of the Future Learning Lab.
Join the conversation on Afternoons with Helen Farmer. This is Afternoons with Helen Farmer.
Join the conversation
On Dubai Eye, 103.8.
You think about the days before the first Industrial Revolution. When somebody got an education in that time, and I'm talking here UK, when they got an education, they were usually a protege to somebody. They were sent to a finishing school if they were a girl. They were taught, they read books. It was very individual. It wasn't them sitting in a classroom of 50, 60 kids. And that's what we've lost when we went into the Industrial Revolution, because now we put 30, 50 kids in a room, taught them all the same thing, and hope to God that by the end of it, they were able to move on to better things.
So true.
I always say this, and I get patronized for it. Parents put their kids in a glorified nursery for 12 years. They don't have to deal with the education because somebody else is being paid to do that. Then can I say, take that money, put it into 1 or 2 people that you trust, that you see have the right values, principles, and the capabilities you want to put into your child, and let them guide the child. A child by the age of 13 should be self-directed. They shouldn't be spoon-fed what they should be learning. And Yeah, that's my 2 cents worth on that.
No, I love that it
comes
comes
in the UAE.
I think it's always worth having these conversations to know what is out there and to hear things from a different perspective, because we do find ourselves,
Sure.
not necessarily getting bogged down in the traditional, but we find ourselves gravitating towards what we know, and I think it is really valuable to understand that there is something else out there. I know we're going to get questions on.
Feel guilty. Yeah, sorry. And a parent should never feel guilty that they're paying good money for their child to go and learn something, and they don't want to be involved in that, because even the parent themselves have a passion, have maybe commitments that they need to take care of, right? I don't want parents who say, Sarah's saying that anybody who's putting their child in a traditional school is horrible. And no, I'm not. But what I'm saying is that amount that you pay for your child to go to a school in the city of Dubai could be better used if you decided to just put it into one or two people that you really appreciate as guides for your children. And that's a full-time job, right? Somebody who can tell you, Sarah today learned about X and Y, and that was part of her project. And here's proof that she's been able to do that.
Sarah Shaw on the Future of Learning. She is from the Future Learning Lab.